Hi, a very good afternoon to all of you, and good afternoon to Ganatra and Meenakshi Jain. Our third panelist, Aabhaas, is on the way, but we'll start with the session with these two writers. I'll start with Ganatra. You've written books on the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, and this session is titled One History, Many Perspectives. So many here might be wondering, how is the Ramayana or the Mahabharata connected to history? Or are we blending history and mythology here?
Hello, namaste, everybody. Good afternoon. I hope you've had your lunch well. So happy to be between two great authors themselves. And coming to your point. So, Mahabharata, Ramayana, are they itihas, are they mythology, are they Puran, are they what? I'll tell you what the parampara says. Okay? The parampara says we have two granthas as itihas, only two. There is a clear differentiation between itihas and Purans as well. So two granthas are itihas, which is Valmiki Ramayana and Veda Vyasa Rachit Mahabharat. What is itihas? Is itihas exactly like we understand history? Well, somewhat, not exactly. But the definition of itihas is itiha asa. Does it happen? So it happened. Aisa pehle hua tha. Now, aisa pehle hua tha, matlab they're definitely talking about an event that happened in the past. This is a short meaning of itihas. The entire definition of itihas that we get says, Purva Vruttam Kathayuktam. Purva Vruttam, something that has happened in the past. Kathayuktam, it has come to us in the form of a story. So it has metaphors in it, yes. But it definitely has a very solid core of something that happened in the past. Mahabharata and Ramayana are the history of our ancestors told to us in a story format. Why? Dharma artha kama mokshanam upadesham samanvitam, to give us the lessons of life, of the Chaturvidha Purushartha. So our rishis are very clear about Mahabharata and Ramayana being itihasa.
Okay, that's interesting. But I'd like to ask you again that we have a well-established theory in India that there are too many Ramayanas. There's a famous essay, 300 Ramayanas, and there are books on the subject as well. But I read in one of your books on the Ramayana that you are, in a way, challenging this concept itself of too many Ramayanas. So what is your challenge to this theory of 300 Ramayanas?
So I am not challenging too many Ramayanas. I am saying, are there many stories written on Ramayana? Are there retellings on Ramayana? Are there fiction written on Ramayana? Are there other books written on Ramayana with the right kind of how? 100%. How can I challenge that? Because it's not happening just now. We have Adhyatma Ramayana, we have Adbhut Ramayana, we have Ramcharitmanas, we have so many of those. But you know what? This thing about 300 Ramayana is a much later day narrative. To say that there is no real Ramayana at all and jisko jo man mein aaye likh sakta hai. That is not the bhav of multiple Ramayans. Because all those kavis who even retold Ramayana with whatever bhav they had, they all did naman. They start their texts with naman to Valmiki ji. So they all agree. Whoever has written on Ramayana or retold Ramayana, all agree that the core, the source, is Valmiki Ramayana. Because Valmiki ji is the contemporary of Sri Ram. He was there when the whole thing happened, right? What else can be a better source? So till recently, I don't think there was any question on whether Ramayana is true or not, or whether Valmiki Ramayana is the source or not. It has always been there. But what happens is when you want to create a narrative and say, kuch bhi chalta hai, right? Then a propaganda is created कि भाई सच कुछ नहीं है, anybody can write whatever they want. They still can. We've always had freedom of liberty. Anybody can write whatever they want. But be honest. What you are writing is not Valmiki Ramayana. You are writing whatever you want to. That's it.
So what, if I've got it right, what you are saying is that there is a core text, there's an uber text, and from that emerge the various texts that we have. Okay.
Not the various texts, but only Valmiki Ramayana and Vedvyas ji Rachit Mahabharata. So Ramayana-related texts, all that have happened. If they refer to it, then yes. If not, like a lot of fiction that gets written today, right?
Yeah.
Where the hero and villains are switched and all of that. And people say, ये तो इसके perspective से है, ये तो उसके perspective से है. So I'll tell the audience one thing. When anybody says इसका perspective, उसका perspective, no, it is fiction. Because how do you know उसका perspective? If somebody says, I'm writing from Ravan's perspective, how do you know Ravan's perspective? You can have Ravan's perspective also, because does it mean that we cannot interpret our text? We 100% can. But for interpretation, you have to agree on the base text. You cannot create new events to justify your conclusion. That is like saying, I create a conclusion, then I create events to justify it. That is not interpretation. That is fiction.
Okay. So I'd like to ask Meenakshi Jain. Yeah.
I want to answer the first question that you asked Ami about mythology, etc. Now, it has become a practice to say that, you doubt the historicity of everything, Indian or Hindu, whichever way you want to use it. But I want to present to the viewers here some evidence of the historicity in quotes of Krishna. You see, it is said that, how do you know that Krishna existed? The earliest evidence that we have, that I would like to present before you, is a literary text, the Chandogya Upanishad. Now you all know that the texts are very difficult to date because they were transmitted orally from one generation to another. But it is conservatively estimated that the Chandogya Upanishad can be placed at 9000 BCE, which means it's about 11,000 years old, according to conservative estimates. Now, why I'm raising this? Because Vaibhav raised the question of mythology, history, and evidence. Now, the Chandogya Upanishad, it has a verse which says that Devki Putra Krishna. The Chandogya Upanishad mentions Devki Putra Krishna in the entire history and religious history and intellectual history of India. We have only one Devki Putra Krishna. Now, this Devki Putra Krishna that the Chandogya Upanishad talks about says this is the name of his guru. It gives the name of his guru as Guru Angirasa, and it also mentions what the guru taught Devki Putra Krishna. And it is so surprising that the Gita Updesh of Devki Putra Krishna has many of the teachings that, according to the Chandogya Upanishad, Devki Putra Krishna learnt from his teacher. So, whether it is history, whether it is mythology, whatever it is not for me to decide, it is for you to decide. That is not the end of the mysteries of history. In the 2nd century, before I come to 2nd century, Panini writes rules of grammar. Those rules of grammar have come down to us in the manner in which Panini wrote them. One of the rules of grammar of Panini was that when you are discussing two people, the shorter name will come first and the bigger name will come second. So if you're discussing, for example, Gita or Ami and Meenakshi, let me put it that way. Ami is a shorter name, she will come first, and Meenakshi is the longer name, it will come later. But Panini says there is only one exception to my rule, and that is when you're discussing Vasudev and Arjun. in this case, you will always mention Vasudev first, Arjun second, because Vasudev is the venerable one. So, Panini in the 6th, 7th century BCE is talking about Vasudev. Then Patanjali. Patanjali, in his rules of grammar, he gives examples. 6 of those examples are related to the life of Krishna. Krishna killed Kans. So, is it mythology? Is it history? Again, it is not for me to decide. It is for you people to decide. Last point that I will make is that this is all textual evidence that I have presented to you. What is the epigraphic evidence? Epigraphic evidence means inscriptions. Now, in Vidisha, Madhya Pradesh, there is a column that is still standing. It is called the Garud Pillar column. This Garud Pillar column was erected by a Greek ambassador to the court of an Indian king. The Greek ambassador came from Taxila, and he erects this Garud pillar column, which is still there. And that Garud pillar has 2 inscriptions. The first is that he writes that this is my name, I've come from this Taxila, from this king, and the ambassador to this court of this king. The second part of the inscription has 2 verses verbatim from the Mahabharata. Now, the question that arises is that Heliodorus, the person who erected this column, was he aware of the Mahabharata before he came to Vidisha? And if you read the Mahabharata itself says, Vaishampayan said, the Mahabharata should be first recited in Taxila. And from there, whoever listens to it will take it to their receptive regions. So the Mahabharata itself records it is first recited in Taxila, and this Greek ambassador knew of the Mahabharata when he came, as is evident from the Garud pillar inscription. So, whether it's a merging of mythology, history, epigraphy, it is a very, very deep connection between them that we should be aware of. Thank you.
Okay. So what you are suggesting is...
Can I make it a little real for somebody who's hearing this for the first time, right? When we say there are multiple stories told, it is not as if it is happening now, huh? Let us remember that. Even the Natyas of Kalidas have taken creative liberty with the original Aitihasik stories. And that has always happened. In fact, if some of you were attending the session with Ram Madhavji, which I moderated, he mentioned the story of Ahalya. Okay? Now, by and large, the story of Ahalya that we know is that she was deceived by Indra and she became a stone. And Sri Ram came, touched her with his feet, and unka uddhar ho gaya. That is what we typically know. But do you know, this is not how the story is in Valmiki Ramayana at all. Because people will be like, patthar ban gayi, how does that happen? Stone ban gayi. All this cannot be true, right? Either it's just a mythical story or some metaphorical stuff. But in Valmiki Ramayana, there is had a momentary lapse of judgment. She knew it is Indra. She consented to the relation. And eventually, when Gautam comes, Gautam punishes Indra. But Gautam asks Ahalya to do prayashchit. What is prayashchit? To live alone in the ashram and do tapasya. She becomes jadavat. She becomes like a stone. Why? Because she is staying alone. She is not a stone, right? Now, with this one change, the whole narrative changes, right? The Ahalya story, if somebody listens to it with a lot of Shraddha Bhav, they'll think, ha, Bhagwan ne udhar kar diya. But for most of us who grew up in this time and generation, we are like, udhar karne ki zarurat kyun padi? What was the wrong she did, right? If she did not do anything wrong, why do udhar at all? What was her issue? Just because she's a woman, right? These were the questions we were asking. So when we actually go back to the Itihas and know the stories for what they are, they're actually very empowering. So do give it a shot.
So this is interesting that Ahalya had given her consent. Yes. Meenakshi ji, you spoke about what you say is textual and epigraphic evidence in favor of the ancient texts, that is Ramayana and the Mahabharata. These texts themselves must have migrated over generations, right? So could you talk about how that process happened? Was there migration or was there not any migration? What happened exactly?
Thank you, Vaibhav. This is a very interesting question. I'll try to answer it to the best of my ability and on the basis of my study of the Mahabharata. The evidence that we have says that around between 500 BC to 100 BC, a group of 500 Brahmins migrated from Mathura region. When they migrated, they took the text of the Mahabharata that was available to them. These 500 Brahmins migrated to the Tamil region, and they lived there till the 7th century Common Era. So we have evidence of the migration of these 500 Brahmin families from Mathura to the Tamil region. Now, in the 7th century, there is an internal upheaval that takes place in Tamil society. And these Brahmins, majority of them, migrate with their text to Kerala. Some of them remain behind in the Tamil region, and the rest migrate to Kerala. Now, in the 20th century, we've all heard of this great Sanskrit scholar, Suktankar, Professor Suktankar. He prepared the critical edition of the Mahabharata. So when he prepared the critical edition, he asked his team to collect as many versions of the Mahabharata that they could from all parts of the country. The idea was that the shortest text that they get will be as close as possible to the original text. So in the North India, they found the shortest text in the Sharda script from the Kashmir region. In South India, the shortest text they found from Kerala. So Professor Suktankar said, how is it that the shortest text of the Mahabharata is being found in Kerala, which is so far away from the Mathura region? And then another very great scholar, T.P. Mahadevan, he traced the journey of this migration. And he said that these are the Brahmin families. They migrated to the Tamil region, then they went to Kerala. And from there, they preserved the oldest, the shortest version of the Mahabharata, which Professor Suktankar used. And who are these Brahmin families in Kerala? We have heard of them, now we know them. They are the Nambudri Brahmins. So this great tradition of the migration of a text from the Mathura region to the Tamil region to Kerala, and then it comes back to the north and is amalgamated in the critical edition of the Mahabharata. I'll just give one more example if I can. Now, you know, since we are talking about the migration of a text, so we've talked about the Mathura region being the birthplace of Lord Krishna. Now, there is
an Arya. And he used to call other people, when he was being critical of them, un-Arya. So then what happens to the Aryan-Dravidian difference and the Aryan invasion theory? I found this fascinating. So could you talk about that a little bit?
So thank you for asking this question. Arya, un-Arya, is definitely not used in our texts the way it has been taught to us. In Ramayana, you have Sita ji, Kaikeyi has been called un-Arya by Dashrath for her conduct. Angad calls his own people, so when they're trying to run away from Kumbhakaran, he says, don't behave like Anarya. What will people talk about you? They will say you are cowards, don't run away. You have Vali being addressed as Arya by his wife Tara. You have Ravan being addressed as Arya and Ravan calling Vibhishan Anarya for criticizing Ravan. Yeah? So Arya Anarya is definitely not a racial word here. Definitely not. Definitely not in the time of Ramayana, right? It was absolutely meant for how the person conducted himself. Acha, even if one were to say that Arya could be racial because everybody wants to hold themselves as the standard, right? But even if that was the case, today when people are trying to own Ravan and say, oh, we are Dravidian, he is Dravidian, hence we'll worship and all that, that is actually stupid. Because Ravan did not think he was an Anarya at all. He did not think he was a Dravidian or anything at all. He thought, he considered himself an Arya only. And this is what we get from Valmiki Ramayana.
I just don't want to cut into his time. So my last intervention. I think that here, archaeology has played a very, very important role.
For posing this question, because if I would say that my source were a lot more than Babarnama, I will be wrong. Babarnama indeed was my central source. But the problem lied in the fact that there were multiple translations. And once you pick the translation, say you have a translation of beverage, and then you have picked the translation done earlier, you'll find discrepancies between them. Maybe they were all trying to lure their reporting manager, whom they reported to. And those biases often can be seen in the text what they were translating. So being a student of science, I'm an architect, I was trying to figure out that whether I pick that translation of beverage or I should go back to someone else. Then I was just left clueless. Then my father, who is also a historian, suggested that it would be the best way to refer to the idea given by Jadunath Sarkar in 1957 when he was retiring. And he said to his pupils, or rather the students and the students of students, that it's a glorious time for historiography because the sources are available in the language of the authority. As in, if you want to refer to Babarnama, the Persian manuscript would be available. So it's a glorious time. But what happened post Jadunath Sarkar saying this, R.C. Mazumdar and few folks followed the tradition of going into the authentic sources. But then came the phase of 70s, 80s, where the translation became more of a thing, and we deviated from the path showed by Jadunath Sarkar. So I attempted to learn Farsi, and I referred to the original Farsi manuscript. This manuscript is the one which was translated, or rather commissioned by Akbar. Translated, I'm forgetting the name of the translator. It was done in 1589, and that's the only primary source which we have right now. And Beveridge did work on the Chagtai Turkic manuscript and a bit from the Persian too. But what we have right now is the Persian one. So I accessed that manuscript, I translated, made the notes out of it, and then built my own narrative. But while I was building the narrative, I was sure that I don't take away the truth of the matter. It may irritate the right, it may irritate the left, but history owes to none, but to the people of that time and that time itself. We can't just change it. It has to be the way it is. Whether, like, when I was talking about Baba being homosexual, it really frustrated a lot of people from both right and the left. But what it did is it opened a Pandora box, because it has got a connection with Afghanistan too. Afghanistan means Taliban, largely. Now, Taliban is responsible for destroying the Bamiyan Buddhas. And Babur was one of the first person to attempt to destroy the Bamiyan Buddhas. And Babur was a homosexual. Babri is the homosexual partner, as we know about him. So, but in the regime of Taliban, a homosexual is supposed to be thrown from the terrace, or whatever the method. But Babur himself was the one who was one of them. So he was supposed to be thrown from the terrace, whatnot. But Taliban followed one of his act which he could not fulfill, which was destruction of Bamiyan. So a lot of things opened. It irritated right, it irritated left, but I'm happy that somehow objective biography is coming out. And the second volume would bring a lot more. Maybe that people in India who like the controversies around Babur will be more excited about it because it will talk about jihad, colonization of the Timurid Empire in Bharat, and henceforth.
That's interesting. So you went back to the primary source and consulted it in the original language, not merely the translations. I must tell you, for the benefit of those who still have to read. Yes, sir, we have a question and answer session after some time, so you can, of course, raise your questions later. But I must say, for the benefit of those who still haven't read Aabhaas's book, that Babur comes across as a very fascinating figure. So he says he's a homosexual. He comes across as a bisexual in that book. Sometimes he likes girls, sometimes he likes boys, and there's one particular boy he likes in front of whom he's speechless. You know, he doesn't know what to say when he comes across that person. So these are some of the fascinating things in that book. Then there are times when he likes wine. Then there are times when he's critical of people who are having wine. So he seems to be a bundle of contradictions. How do you explain this contradictory personality of this very young Babur, who's lost his father at 11, who loses his state, regains his state, again has to take refuge somewhere else. But he also seems to be a survivor of sorts. So how do you explain these contradictions in his personality, and also the fact that he's able to survive despite all these early difficulties and challenges, and also his speechlessness, if you can talk about, in front of the boy he likes?
Okay, so maybe I'll pick from there, the Babri. So, yes, so Babri's incidents happens when he's first time married to Aisha is the first wife's name. And he explains in Baburnama that he's very shy to go to his wife. He's not very happy to go to his wife. And he rather has found a boy named Babri in the Camp Bazaar of Kabul. And when he looks into his eyes, suddenly he becomes very shy and his eyes turns down. And then he says that I'm married in the love of this guy called Babri, and I just can't live without him. And he goes on to write poems, etc., so many things. And Babur indeed is a very fascinating character. Because imagine a man making towers of skulls when he's doing a general massacres of the Afghans. Today,
So I wanted to ask you about that also. He has a habit of building pyramids of skulls.
Yes. So he does build it in Kabul.
So what kind of design is that?
So what's very interesting that today the Afghans are so proud of Babur, but he did a three general massacre of the Afghans when he was entering into Kabul, and he made the skull tower. He literally counted that how many skulls, or rather the heads, they become skulls later on by decaying. So he will count them, and in the evening he will write poems. He's a good poet. Let's give him the due credit where it's required. He was a very good poet, and imagine he has done a massacre, he's counting them, and in the evening he's writing poems about it. So it's a very different character, I would say. We don't find such character unless you are trying to look at some psychopathic serial killer kind of story somewhere in Netflix or somewhere.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you will not find such character in general. Yeah. Then he was a very good family man, though. Unlike his predecessor, who will come in the days to successors who will come in the days to come. He did take care of his mother. He did take care of everyone who were related to him. Like when he defeated Lodi, and a lot of treasure did come out. He sent out all the treasures to Samarkand. He sent the treasure to Kabul. And it's a saying that in Kabul, at least one silver coin was with one of each soul. So when you have said that, oh, Angrez aaye, wo loot ke gaye, but the Mughals, or rather Timurids, did not do anything. It had begun right from that period when Babur had come. So he had loaded the full of treasury. It was taken to Samarkand, Kabul, and elsewhere. And the things continued. But it really becomes interesting because people are very fond of Babur today still. There are people who say a lot of things. But then the question comes at what are you proud of him? Say, A, he was homosexual or bisexual. B, he was a good family man. Okay, fine. But that cannot be something which will make you so fascinated, hey, Babur is my hero. Third, he was a great poet, but he was not Mirza Ghalib at least. Then fourth, he was big Hindu phobe, or rather, he was in fact, on the eve of the Battle of Kanwa, he breaks the vessels of alcohol and says that I'm going to break the idols of the Hindus exactly the way I have broken the vessels of the alcohol. So he's comparing the Hindu gods with that. So it's other thing that, because the topic was also called perspective. So once Nehruji had given a perspective that perhaps Babur can be the most cultured and he's the most cultured man whom you will meet ever, right? But Nehru is the same person who also propagated the idea of Ashoka, the Dham and all. But Babur is also the man who first time attempted to destroy the Bamiyan Buddhas, right? And he being compared to the icon of culture, it just goes a bit far-fetched. You can be a good poet and whatnot, but certainly not a very cultured man who destroys the idols and carries the legacy that way.
Yeah, okay. We have some time for questions. I would have liked to ask him one question quickly if you can answer, because we have about 8 minutes left. But I see in your book that Babur is critical of the Mughals.
Oh, yes.
Now see, that is something, if you could explain to people what that really means and why he is critical, because Babur, we have learned that Babur is a Mughal, right? So then how is he critical of the Mughals?
So I'll try to answer it very quickly because I can see the time ticking.
See the time, yeah.
So the Mughals are the people who come from the lineage of Changiz Khan. And Babur's maternal side comes from Changiz lineage. Babur's paternal side comes from the Taimur. And Taimur was not very fond of calling himself Mughal. Taimur is in the 10th generation, Changiz in the 5th generation of a common ancestor called Tumane Khan, who is on the top. Tumane Khan certainly is a Mongol, but now Taimur has Persianized himself. He's very Persian by nature, he's fond of Persian culture. Changiz is a very secular killer, I must put it. He kills everybody, whoever is the enemy. He does not differentiate in base of religion, right? But Taimur is a bigot. He kills only the infidels. And in fact, he takes the prescription from the holy book that how, when he goes to the battle, that what exactly I'm going to do with these people. Let's take the prescription from there, right? And Babur's paternal lineage comes from Taimur, and he always calls himself a Timurid. And the empire which was established was called Timurid Gurkhani. We never find the mention of a Mughal empire being established. It was more of a fallacy of the Europeans because race was important for them. So they always saw these people even as the Mughals because the race or the origin is Mughal. But it's a long story. Perhaps we cannot wrap it up here.
So maybe people can have a look at your book and find out more about it. If we have time for questions. Yes, sir. You have... could you take... could we please give him a mic? I would request people to ask questions,
Today,
please.
Mahabharata is taking place every day in India. Look at our parliament. What is happening? We have no
Sir,
time
if you could
to
ask a
discuss the
question.
people's problem. The Mahabharata in Parliament of India. How can we educate the Parliament of India?
Could somebody please ask a question? Yeah.
Jai Shri Ram versus Jai Siya Ram, which was the older chant, Jai Siya Ram?
Ma'am, the chants have come later. So say Jai Shri Ram, Shri also people say it symbolizes Lakshmi, which is Siya, right? So you call it Jai Siya Ram, Jai Shri Ram. I don't think it matters at all. It's perfectly okay to call whatever.
Either way.
Yeah, if you could please give her the mic. Keep it a question, please.
Meenakshi ma'am, I wanted to ask in the last session, A.K. Warder in his writings, he says that India lost the day when she forgot Kautilya's teachings. What did he exactly? India lost the day it forgot the teachings of Kautilya. So what did he imply by that? Or maybe
Can I answer that? Can I answer that?
Yeah, sure.
So I'll tell you, probably the person you quote also didn't know the Indian system so well. Is Kautilya's Arthashastra one of the gems of administration and governance and foreign policy? Absolutely. But it is not the only one. what Kautilya starts with in the very beginning of Arthashastra. He says, whatever I'm going to put in this book, I have compiled the teachings of the gurus of Arthashastra who have come before me. And in the Arthashastra, he takes up a topic, say, kuch punishment dena hai, right? He'll say, this school, the school of Manu says X, the school of Parashar says Y. Some places he will agree. If not, he'll say, na iti Kautilya. Kautilya doesn't agree, and he gives his point of view. So what Arthashastra is not a standalone text of administration. The depth, the profound wisdom of what governance should be or Raja should be, it comes all the way from Ramayana, from Mahabharata, and all the Dharma Shastras as well. In fact, in the new book that has come out, Mahabharata Unraveled 2 part, the second part of Mahabharata Unraveled, the red book, I talk in detail about Shanti Parva. Now, usually when we talk of Mahabharata, it ends at the war. Ki war ho gaya, khatam. No, the biggest parva, the biggest chapter of the 18 chapters of Mahabharata actually comes after the war. It is the Shanti Parva. And this entire Shanti Parva is the discourse on Raj Dharma, the role of a Raja, how should administration happen, how should governance happen. The whole thing is covered in that. So, did we lose out by forgetting the teachings of our rishis? Absolutely. But not just Kautilya. There are lots many before as well as after. Janmajay's yagna, right? From that time to writing down, clearly there may have been addition, extrapolations, all of that, which sort of show as well. But the critical edition has, by and large, done a fantastic job of giving us the core story. Now, when I say fiction, I have to say what I mean by that, yeah? And the difference between interpretation. So whenever I ask people and I tell them, ki, Acha, Mahabharata ka yudh kyun hua? What led to the war of Mahabharata? By and large, 90% of the people will tell me because of Draupadi. Draupadi ne kaha, andhe ka putra andha. Okay? Now, is this fiction or is this interpretation? I would call it fiction because in no manuscript of Mahabharata does andhe ka putra andha appear. Okay? So, when a story is told with events created to come to a certain conclusion, they have to be fiction, right? Because the original did not have it. Whatever you have in the critical edition, you can have a view on that. Ki, nahi, ye sahi hai, ye galat hai. That is different. Anything that creates new events to justify a story, that is fiction.
Okay, just to conclude, we have one final question, please. Quickly. We are running out of time. By the time the mic reaches him, I'll just mention that Ami's book also mentions that the Valmiki Ramayana does not mention the Lakshman Rekha at all. So that's one of the points that, we were discussing, that what is true and what is not true.
Hello. Thank you, ma'am.
There is no literal Lakshman Rekha. The tolerance of Lakshman has been broken. Okay? But there is no literal Lakshman Rekha. The literal drawing of Lakshman Rekha comes from Kritibas Ojha Ramayana narration, which was done in Bengali. That's where it comes from.
Yeah. So quickly, if you could ask, we're out of time.
2 questions, small. One question to Ami, ma'am. Ma'am, the story, the 100 story you mentioned, right? It can be Kalpa Bheda also, right? It cannot be just like different version of stories. It may be different Kalps can have the different story. And one question to Meenakshi, ma'am.
Sir, let me answer that. This Kalpa Valpa thing happens a lot ajkal. What story should we be bothered with? This Kalpa, even if you believe the Kalpa thing, right? Okay. How will you know? Was that story that you are telling me right now? How do you know it is from any other Kalpa?
But because many Puranas, right? Padma Purana and all, they mention, right?
Again, see, you will have to differentiate between Itihas and Puran as well. Okay? Puran writing has happened till much later. And you will never be able to prove a Kalpa thing. If you want to believe Kalpa, you may believe. It is just a matter of belief. So you can believe whatever you want to.